we started? Yes.
Professor Pat Primore from the Institute of Education and the London International Development Centre. Thank you very much. I'm leading a study which is looking at obesity and undernutrition in Chile and Kenya. It's looking particularly at the nutrition-sensitive interventions. So I was, and it's focusing on urbanisation. So I was listening up for you to say something about urbanisation. Maybe I can just ask if you consider that and whether there is anything in these papers about that. And the second one is we've been struggling a little bit as we come to write up some of this work to find a common framework to encompass under and over. And so I'm interested in the framework you have here. Just very quickly looking at it, it looks as if it's still focused a lot on undernutrition. But perhaps there might be a chance to have a look at it and actually flag up where this common framework might be coming. Because I think there are elements there, but maybe some things that have been missed.
Urban and rural differences, yes, we do look a bit in paper one at that. In the appendix, we have some information on stunting rates, urban and rural obesity rates. There is of course some difference, more stunting in rural areas. It doesn't do justice though because we haven't disentangled the urban poor, even slum populations, from all urban populations, and I think that's some work that. We actually have some analyses, but we don't present them. They were done in background to the series, but we just didn't fit them in. So we do have some information on that tries to use the survey data to really look at urban poor. The other question I've already forgotten. The framework, yes. So I need to write down. Yes, thank you. We did try to have the framework address both undernutrition and overweight and obesity. I agree we probably have not fully succeeded in doing that, and would welcome any suggestions on it. We were trying to get in underweight and overweight and development, and having all of those in one framework was a little tricky, without making it a 6-page figure. But if we can do better with what you're suggesting, let us know. We'll try.
Okay. So about two things that I thought you might want to mention. One is how much data allows us to estimate jointly, at a household level, the combination of adult obesity and child malnutrition. In other words, are we seeing the double burden not just at a society level, but also at a household level? I'm talking particularly about maternal obesity and child malnutrition. And the second question, could you elaborate a little more beyond what you've done on what might be the next steps needed to quantify developmental outcomes in terms of consequences of both macro and micronutrient nutrition?
Go on, Bob. Why don't you take them one?
Okay. So, yes, I mean, there's some limited information on, you might say, the double burden of malnutrition in households. So, overweight mothers, underweight children, or stunted children. There is certainly some information on that in the U.S. as well as internationally. It's a sort of widespread phenomenon. I think there have been some analyses. I don't know if Francesco wants to comment. I think Mercedes Jonas has done some analysis of the undernutrition and obesity issues. Let me answer the other question. Maybe then if Francisco wants, he can comment. Developmental consequences. I think yes. There is more need for work on quantifying those. We have Sally Grantham McGregor as one of our authors, and she's in the audience and the expert on this. So I'll just blunder out an answer, and then she'll correct me. It seems to me that we have varying measures of child development that have been used in these studies, but perhaps not ideal metrics, measures of child development that really allow us to early on in a child's life say whether the child is on track or not on track for in regard to development. And I do think there's a need for some research on the developmental metrics that can be very widely used outside of real expert groups, and also the long-term consequences. There's rather limited information on long-term, and almost all of that is observation. I think we have very few studies, such as the Guatemala trial, that really are experimental, that show, long-term effects. And I would love to see more experimental data to really address how much is really related to intervention and how much is confounding, because obviously we have children living in difficult circumstances where there are many insults to their development, and I think we also recognize that it's in those environments. It's not only the nutrition aspects; it's the stimulation that the child gets. So it's probably a combination effect for development. I don't know.
Francesco Branco from WHO. Thank you, Bob. And indeed, there is some very interesting information about children who are stunted, but at the same time they're overweight. Ricardo Wawi pointed out this a few years ago already for Latin America. In reality, in our team has been looking at it globally, and it's actually not only Latin America, it's actually a pretty common, more common than we think, condition. There are biological reasons for that, of course, but it's certainly difficult to explain. It's counterintuitive in a sense that, when we communicate this, people say, okay, how can you be undernourished and overnourished at the same time? Actually, we don't like to use the word overnourished, because the problem really is the quality of food and the fact that probably there's a common inadequate provision of foods that really goes through the development of poor failure to grow and the development of overweight and obesity. But I think it's really great that the series points out to this common situation. It's something to do.
Yes.
Hi, Lucy Sullivan, 1,000 Days. So the data around the fact that malnutrition causes 45% of all child deaths is pretty astounding. I'd love to hear your point of view on how that may or may not be a game changer for the child survival agenda.
Should I go on?
Yes, go on, absolutely.
Well, we have recognized that nutrition, undernutrition, is important for child mortality for some time. Unfortunately, it still hasn't gotten the traction and support that it should have. I think a combination now of maybe more recognition of that role in child mortality and the other consequences of undernutrition, developmental consequences, national economic consequences, are maybe collectively now getting recognition and may get more action. So I would say those of us working on child survival maybe need to push this even more, if that's what you're maybe leading me to do, because obviously it is important. And it's no coincidence that I work on child survival and I've coordinated this series, because I do think undernutrition is really sort of underpinning of the child mortality story.
Can I just follow up with a question on this? Because over the last few months, we've had a focus on childhood pneumonia and diarrhea, which you've been involved in. We've had much greater attention to a whole variety of issues. I mean, for example, newborn health also gets missed out very much in the way we think about children, and then the link with maternal health. There are many different issues that get picked out almost separately for advocacy. But nutrition is a way of, in a sense, uniting many of those. Could you just talk a little bit more about how, within the maternal and child health community, we might find a way to use nutrition to be a uniting force? Because one of the difficulties I have is that you go to these separate meetings, and there's literally pneumonia and diarrhea on a Wednesday, and newborn health on a Friday, and then something else on the following Tuesday. And this is not good for the way we try and build the strategies.
Yeah. So, I think it is a problem. We tend to now talk a lot about the continuum of care, maternal, newborn, child. If you look at the maternal side of things, as I've said, I think there are major nutrition problems that need to be addressed. I think there's a bit of resistance in the maternal health community because, to them, that's not emergency care, or that's not what they think saves lives. And in fact, the finding that there's a large attribution of death to anemia, they basically reject, ignore, attack. So I think there's a disconnect there that we need to figure out how to bridge better. I think the new findings on small for gestational age should help us bridge to the neonatal community, especially. I think they had thought, well, it's mostly prematurity. The new findings that prematurity, of course, is important, but even children who are not premature, even children who are not less than 2,500 grams are at elevated risk of death, thanks to Sheldon Katz's work. I think this actually is really a cogent finding for nutrition being involved in the neonatal area. I think that in the child health beyond the neonatal period, to some extent, we have, those of us in that community have recognized the interaction and the synergy. The series on pneumonia and diarrhea did talk about nutritional risk factors, although it wasn't a very prominent part. It was clearly there. And we've in the past in a number of ways called for more integration of nutrition and health, even in agencies such as with our friends at UNICEF. That somehow that doesn't happen because there are still some silos in agencies and in countries. So I do think it's a bigger problem to figure out how the nutrition and health communities across the continuum of care can really work better together. And I agree with you, nutrition could be some unifying aspect if we're able to use that to address all the needs.
Good, let me come back to the audience. Yes.
Sample to from Action Based Handbook. In terms of the small gestational age ratings that's stunted, do you have any feeling of how we can deal with those children in terms of do they experience intellectual growth and the current research in the is appropriate for those children or not?
Well, I think any baby, whether they're small for gestational age or not, going to need the same things initially, breastfeeding and exclusive breastfeeding. After that, with complementary feeding, I don't know of evidence that particularly targeting those babies would be a better strategy. I think there is information in regard to more prospective education or, if necessary, food supplements at particular ages to encourage growth, for example, a study from Haiti. So rather than wait for a child to become stunted, regardless of where they started, really try to ensure more prospectively, preventively, that they don't get stunted. And I think those approaches, I think, apply to the babies who are born small for gestational age as much as they do, to others.
Yes, please.
Steve Lewis from Results. I wanted to make a comment about the introduction and the way we are all pleased with the high-level panel having a goal on nutrition, and the new evidence we're listening to contributes to that. But I think it's worth emphasising that this was an indicative goal in a report that contributes to a long process. There's 2 years to go. There are going to be more drafts, and the nutrition community have to use this evidence to make sure that goal stays in there and to put flesh onto the indicators. We can't assume it's a done deal. We can't assume it's a win.
No, I think that's a very good point. We're going to have a chance as the morning and the afternoon goes on. I think we need to keep that central in our minds. So, thank you. Did you want to make any comments
No,
on
I
this
agree.
as well? Yeah.
As you say, this is in the middle of a discussion, and we need to finish it and make sure nutrition is prominent.
Okay, sweeping across the room, anybody got any final comments? Zulfi is burning to say something down here, but anybody else? Zulfi.
No, it's not. I'm not burning to say this, but I think since you raised this, I think the integration agenda is extremely important, and
Yeah.
we should talk about this throughout the day. But one big challenge, not just the maternal health community, Bob, is the reproductive health issues and their relation to nutrition. So I strongly believe, Richard, that this is one way of maybe gluing a number of things together.
Yeah.
In SGA, yes, maybe the interventions that need to address SGA have to start with things like family planning, changing the age at first marriage, reducing teenage pregnancy. Those are the kind of things that we don't talk about commonly in nutrition intervention. So I think there is an opportunity now for bringing a number of things together and maybe doing something around integration that we've spoken about but not really done there.
Oh, and yes, Sally.
Okay. No, I would just like to say I think nutrition is a very good centre place to piggyback things. But I think there's a slight problem because for child development, the malnourished kid is the kid that has a terribly poorly stimulated home environment, and those children are going to develop poorly, whether they're malnourished or not. But it doesn't stop at 1,000 days. And that worries me a bit, because if we can find a way of integrating with nutrition, and everything's going to 1,000 days, if after 1,000 days the kids don't get any extra stimulation, preschool and that type of thing, they're going to drop off badly. And we know that if children get severely malnourished, their development is going to be bad. In Bangladesh, sometimes they're off the IQ scale if they're severely malnourished. It's that bad. We haven't much evidence to say that if you feed malnourished children, their development improves. So you've got to stop them getting malnourished if you're going to claim the child development. So there's this difference in age and stage of development, whereas nutrition is absolutely critical to stop it happening. Once it's happened, we don't know if feeding alone, it'll save their lives, but whether it will save their development, we don't know.
Yes, David.
Thank you. David Nabarro from United Nations. I actually wanted to really acknowledge one of the slides. I just wondered if it's possible to go to it. It's Figure 1, Framework for Actions to Achieve this one. For me, this is an extraordinary graphic, because, as you say, it's talking about the necessary elements of potentiating optimal fetal and child nutrition and development, which is a big shift from what was in the 2008 series. And I just wanted to ask you, Bob, supposing I was a person who's involved in a national child development policy, and I met you on one of your journeys, and I said to you, Professor Black, do you, as editor of the series, believe that your series provides evidence that encompasses all these interactions? Would you say to me yes, or would you say to me there's still stuff to be checked through? Or would you say this was an analytical framework and not really something that could be used as evidence, particularly, for example, if a Minister for Women and Child Development is arguing for more resources or better integration or the combination of the two?
Well, I think it is a conceptual framework. In regard to the strength of the evidence connecting all these boxes is variable. I think the strength of the evidence for most of the nutrition-specific interventions is very good. The strength of the evidence for the nutrition-sensitive areas is much more highly variable, as we'll hear from Marie. I think what's in this box on nutrition-sensitive interventions or programs are all those things we think have relationships to nutrition, we think should have effects. We think we have some guidance in regard to how to make them have a greater effect on nutrition, but the evidence is still rather limited. In the box in relationship to the enabling environment, as we'll hear, I mean, this comes from experiences, it comes from sort of global experiences, including the discussions about what sun is doing. And I would say here again, the evidence is mixed, although these case studies that have been done, I think, are very instructive. I think the approaches that are being proposed seem very sensible. But I think, again, we need more experience with them. We need more documentation, evaluation, if you will, of really what works. And I hope Lawrence, when he presents, can expand on that.